my great pleasure to announce our very own Sarah Lacy and Mr. Ben Horowitz.
That's it. Usually Paul does the introductions. This is the first PandoMonthly that Paul Carr has missed, and usually he tells like everyone to fuck off about 6 times. But since we've got Ben here tonight, I guess Ani felt that wasn't necessary.
I'll keep that in mind.
Sometimes people tell you to turn off your phones. Just as we've said last time, please don't turn off your phones. Please tweet about this, because we are a company that wants to build buzz and make money. So whether you love it or hate it, please do tweet about it. Do not turn off your phones. All right, Ben.
What's happening?
Welcome.
Thank you.
We should start with a disclosure. You're one of our messiest disclosures. So you're not an investor in us. You said you didn't believe in us at all when I asked you to invest. That's not true.
That's not true, but yes, I did not invest.
But your partners, Mark Andreessen and Jeff Jordan, invested.
Yep.
So take that for what you will. And your daughter, Sophia, works for us as an intern.
Yeah, but that was a favor to you, not vice versa.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. I've actually gotten angry letters from people that she interned for last summer that we stole her from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a way to exploit some of her skills over the summer. Like, I understand she can do like a Rubik's Cube in under 3 minutes. She's very good at Scrabble, can beat her dad at Scrabble.
Yeah.
Her reference actually was that she edits Ben's blog.
Yeah, she does do that. And she does a fine job also.
She does. I want to start with a couple quotes from your blog. I actually asked Sophia to go through and pull some of her favorite quotes as your editor, just in case people haven't read it so they don't know what you're getting into. This is not checkers, this is motherfucking chess. There's no silver bullet that's going to fix that. No, we are going to have to use a lot of lead bullets. Oh, snap. If one of your big dogs destroys communication on your staff, you need to send her to the pound. And then one of my favorites, I'm not totally sure what this means. If you hire a professional to find the product cycle, get the jelly because your company will soon be toast. Is this just how you talk in everyday life?
Yeah, well, most of my writing is about kind of building a company and management, and I always felt when I was doing it, the hard part wasn't like the logical part. The logical part is actually pretty easy to understand. Like the mechanics of building a company are a lot simpler than, say, computer science, but the emotional part of it is like super difficult. And so in the writing, I always try to connect people to like, how should you like feel about it, not how should you think about it.
So the last thing that I'll embarrass you and Sophia with is the first time I met her, we were talking about your love of rap music, which everybody knows. And she said that several times at your fancy home in Woodside, the cops have been called, and it's not the kids, it's you listening to rap music too loud. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
But I always talk them out of arresting me or taking me to jail. So.
That's good. I think we might have read about it if that weren't the case. So I want to wind back the conversation and talk about how you first came to Silicon Valley. I feel like Silicon Valley has such a rich history that we're always so obsessed with the here and now we don't really talk about, and it's rare that we have someone on stage who sort of dates back to the very early Silicon Graphics days. So what were you doing before? What was Silicon Valley then, and how did you end up here?
Well, you know, I was actually a student at Columbia in New York, and I got a summer internship at Silicon Graphics, and I had no idea what Silicon Valley was. You know, I grew up in the People's Republic of Berkeley. Woohoo! Berkeley is about as far from Silicon Valley as New York is, at least culturally. And so when I got that job, it was just so shocking to me. Like, one, like how smart everybody was, how hard they were working, and like the products, the Silicon Graphics products were just crazy. And I just didn't know that there was a place like in the world that was like that. And my prior jobs had been, I'd been like a busboy and a bellhop and stuff, like nasty jobs. And I was
So
like,
you hadn't even
yeah.
had like a white collar job before?
Yeah, no, it was my first white collar job.
Wow.
And so,
and I mean, was
it
Silicon
was-
Graphics,
yeah.
was that the height of Silicon Graphics when it was the hot company in the Valley?
well, it was probably just before the peak when it was the Gee Whiz company and all that stuff. So, it was in the late 80s. But for a computer science guy, I mean, like we were, basically my job when I first got there, we were taking IRIX. Anybody remember IRIX? And they had just built the first multiprocessor machines, which were like some of the first multiprocessor machines like in the industry. And we were like trying to make the operating system work on the multiprocessor machines, and like you had to semaphore the kernel and like protect all the areas and make sure you didn't have race conditions. And I was just like, wow, like this is unbelievable. Like I wasn't even reading about that in school yet, and we were doing it. So it was.
Were you kind of
awesome.
intimidated?
It was just so exciting. It was almost like I couldn't even. It was the most exciting thing I could ever imagine. It was just awesome. And then it was funny because I would tell everybody about it, like back at school at Columbia, and I tell when I met my wife, I would tell her about it. Nobody quite got what I was talking about. They were like, "Yeah, don't they have jobs like that here?" And I'm like, "No, there's no place in the world."
Was Silicon Valley still very like orchardy at that time? Was it built? I mean, was it? I mean, because well, no, I mean that's not. It's, like there. Even when I got here in the '90s, there were still families who were like decrying how much campuses were taking over sort of the old Valley, and for a long time there was this disconnect between its roots. I mean, you still see this when you go on Woodside Road.
Yeah, it was starting to build up, and the Silicon Graphics campus itself was, it's a Google campus now, like awesome, like one of the most spectacular things, and they had really taken, they were one of those companies that took the care with the facilities and all that. So it seemed pretty like big and built up to me, but I was a kid, so it was just like, in being in like Alice in Wonderland, it was just awesome.
So did you just come for the summer and then did you go back to school?
Yeah, I came for the summer, I went back, but then I worked there 3 more summers and I joined as soon as I got out of school because like it was my dream.
So did you work very closely with Jim Clark there?
Yeah, no, well I was aware of Jim Clark, and he was he was such a kid, like the most brilliant guy in the world, and then there was always like Jim would say something like, and I would be like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And that was Jim. He was like both completely a genius, and then but he had like, he was kind of a volatile. He was not manageable. He was his first kind of instance that I understood of a guy who was completely brilliant, but like he wasn't somebody who was going to be like managed and directed by the CEO. He was his own thing. So I got a little taste of that, and everybody loved him there. I mean, they loved Jim Clark at Silicon Graphics, all the engineers at least.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, we didn't mean to keep the phone on that way. How would you compare Jim Clark in that respect to other Valley CEOs and founders since? Because a lot of people describe other founders that way, but my understanding is Jim Clark was sort of in a league of his own.
Yeah, he... I knew him a bit, and then I knew him a lot through Mark, through the stories, and then I knew him more at Netscape. Jim was more extreme. He was both smarter than a lot of the kind of... He was really smarter than anybody, almost. I mean, here's a guy who completely revolutionized computer graphics. I mean, when he was a professor at Stanford. And Silicon Graphics was so far ahead of its time. And so he really was a genius, but then he was like also super volatile. I give, I'm trying to think of, I give a couple of stories. So one was, I had just done this deal with Sun Microsystems when I was at Netscape, and I had like put the deal all together for them to OEM basically all our products, and it was a big deal and a lot of money, and I was the product manager, and I was really excited, and they called me up the day after we do the deal, like for them to carry all our software. And they're furious because Jim Clark, in his keynote at Comdex, said, they asked him, well, what do you think about Sun's software efforts, which was basically our software? And Jim says, oh, that's like a zebra trying to lose its stripes with paint. And so they were like, what is he doing? Like, and like, so that was Jim. That was kind of like one of the kinds of things he said. And then I'll never forget one time he comes into the cafeteria, you know, and I'm like, at that time I was an executive, and he sits down at the table and he's like, Ben, what are we going to do about the stock price? And, you know, it was like a shocking question for me because I wasn't that senior. What could I do about the stock price? He's like, I need to have $1 billion after taxes. Like in front of all the employees and everything, you know, and I'm just going, wow, that's probably going to be a little demotivating. But it was Jim, you know, he just said whatever was on his mind, and you know, sometimes you know, it was the most genius thing of all times, and sometimes it was stuff like that.
So when you see entrepreneurs come in now as a VC and they have that Jim Clark essence, do you back them or do you not back them? Because there's obviously good and bad about it.
Yeah, so we really believe strongly, and this is something that took me a long time to learn, but we believe very strongly in strength over lack of weakness. So we'd much rather take somebody with a great strengths and horrible weaknesses, which often go together, than somebody who is like very good across the board. And Jim was certainly like, you'd back Jim Clark all day long, every day of the week with all of his issues. Now, you know, and he understood very well the, you know, his limitations. He never wanted to be CEO or, you know, although he was CEO of Netscape for a short while, but it wasn't his long-term plan, and he wasn't CEO of Silicon Graphics very long either, because he knew he was, you know, he had that explosive personality. But you trade that because, you know, best in world. Like if you can get somebody who's best in world, either as a hire or a founder or anything like that, you know, that's what's required to build a great technology company. You know, this isn't an old company. You're not going to work for, you know, Walmart or something like that that's more established. You've got to build something out of nothing and beat everybody in the world. So for that, you need greatness, and you'll deal with like issues for greatness. So you take Randy Moss in our world, for example.
So you've been in the Valley a long time. I know you and Mark are both also, you know, study a lot of Valley history. If you were to rank like the top 5 founders or minds of Silicon Valley history, who would be on that list?
Yeah, that's a hard one because there's so many great ones. I mean, so I love when we just kind of say, you know, some of my personal heroes. Andy Grove, who is probably maybe my all-time favorite.
And can you give like a short sentence on why? Because I know everyone knows who Andy Grove is, but...
Well, Andy Grove was like the toughest, smartest guy like ever to run a company in these parts. So, I mean, he escapes Hungary when he's a kid, 18 years old, you know, because basically the communists are killing all the Jews, and he has to escape, and he escapes on foot and runs across the border and gets himself to America. On his way to America, you know, as an 18-year-old kid, they're giving shots to people, and it's like, I think it's the late 40s or early 50s, and he spots like one of the doctors was black on the boat, and he's like, I'm getting a shot for him because calculating the odds of a black man becoming a doctor in America now, very low. He must be a genius, and he gets a shot. Like that's the kind of like mind he had. And then, you know, he gets to America and he gets himself into CCNY, and he doesn't really speak English, but he like enrolls himself as I think as a physics student, and he flunks all his classes his freshman year. But he like redoubles his effort, and he studies, and he's working full time, putting himself through school, and he ends up, you know, writing all these like some of the most like important papers in the field of electrical engineering. And then, you know, while he's doing it, like he would say, you know, at the end of the week, if I had done really well, I would spend a nickel and get a Coke. And he said, but I always felt guilty about not sending that nickel home. You know, like that's how like tough he was. And then he ran Intel. And the greatest pivot probably, the largest pivot in the history of the technology business was Intel, 14 years old, basically winning in the computer memory business, but the Japanese through kind of what were really illegal tactics, selling products below cost, were putting Intel out of business. And he basically got out of 80% of the revenue in the business and turned it into a microprocessor company. And and then he wrote a great book on that called Only the Paranoid Survive, and he wrote one of probably the best management books called High Output Management. But the best thing about him is he's just so tough. Like he's the toughest guy you'd ever want to meet. I mean, like Andy Grove was hard. So my favorite story about him at Intel, they're having a meeting and somebody comes in late, and Andy Grove looks at him and he goes, "All I have in this world is time, and you are wasting it." That's Andy Grove. And
Okay, so Andy Grove's one.
Great guy. So Andy Grove, definitely Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett. They just what they did. But kind of culturally, how they, in terms of organizational design, the early organizational design of Hewlett Packard was. I mean, it let them go from an instruments company to a computer company, which is just amazing. Of course, Steve Jobs. I think everybody knows so much about Steve Jobs.
Did you know Steve Jobs well at all?
No, I didn't know him well. I'd met him, but I didn't know him well. But of course, followed all of his work.
Right.
And then I knew him through my friends. So one of my best friends is Bill Campbell, who was one of Steve Jobs' best friends. So when your best friend is somebody's best friend, you hear a lot about him. So I've heard a lot about him.
I have that, not with Steve Jobs, but other people you've never heard of.
But a lot of the things he did was really. And one of my favorite things about Steve Jobs is, he wasn't really. He, like so many of us, when he started, he wasn't a really good CEO. Like his first time through at Apple, and so much so that he actually hired his own replacement. He went out and recruited John Scully. It wasn't somebody made him do that. He went out and did that. Bad hire. But then he built Next, which was a company that didn't succeed. But he really learned how to be CEO at Next. And, one of the great things, if you guys haven't seen it, is the management, training videos and, where there are videos of him kind of teaching the Next guys about the product on the internet. And it's really, you can see how he developed into a manager, and then when he retook over Apple, he understood enough of it to be super effective.
There was a debate about this at All Things D this year because the CEO of Pixar and Larry Ellison were doing a tribute to Jobs, and Ellison kept really saying, well, he should have never been kicked out, obviously, because when he came back he was great. And I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the guy from Pixar's name, but he was saying no, he actually changed while he was away. I mean, there was this development over that period, and he felt like had Jobs not gone through that whole thing, he wouldn't have been the man he was when he came back.
Well, I think both are right to some degree. So I think that Larry is right that they shouldn't have kicked him out of the company, and I talk to Bill all the time about this. And his big, one of the big philosophies of our firm is the founders are fundamental to the company succeeding, and a lot of that I got from Bill from his experience at Apple and what happened when they ejected Jobs. So I think they clearly lost their direction by kicking him out of the company, and they should have dealt with his weaknesses to keep his strengths. This is a classic, strength versus lack of. Steve Jobs is one of the ultimate examples of that, right? Weaknesses well documented, and they really are weaknesses. They're not just part of the genius that he curses people out for no reason. That's not genius. That's just idiotic. But it doesn't matter if your strengths are strong enough, right? And so. So that was right, but I do think that there's no question that building Next kind of, when you go through a hard company build, there's really something to that that is irreplaceable, and I think that's what was required to then come back and do the great things he did at the end.
Right. I have a feeling this will come back up when we get to LoudCloud, but okay. So you mentioned four now. Do you have one more? Is there anyone of this generation you would? You don't have to, but I'm just curious if there's anyone you think is at that level.
Yeah, so, I am definitely a big fan of Mark Zuckerberg and what he's doing, and that's somebody, who I've worked closely with and seen him. I met Mark in 2007 when I think that's when he was getting incredibly criticized, and I think Valleywag called for his head, Mark Zuckerberg needs to step down. It's good thinking.
One of many reasons Valleywag's out of business.
Yeah, good thinking, Valleywag. But he was learning how to be CEO, and the company was growing very fast. And then he had a a staff at that time that didn't necessarily believe in the long-term potential of the company, and he was just a kid. And it was a very difficult time for him, and watching him figure that out and become the CEO he's become, and the way the company runs is just like, very, very impressive on a lot of levels. How they hire, how they think about titling, how they train people, how they organize, is all like extremely impressive from just like as a CEO observer. And then of course he has such a great vision for the company. So I think he's doing quite a good job.
So when I was working on my first book, I was spending a lot of time with Mark Andreessen and Mark Zuckerberg, and I frequently meet with them on the same day because they were the only two main people in the book who were both in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help thinking like I was looking back in time, but from one to the other, because they both kind of were that young poster child of that era. And I didn't know Andreessen when he was in his early 20s, because I was a nobody then, and you guys wouldn't talk to me.
Yeah.
But how similar or different is what they had to go through?
Well, I think they did go through a lot of similar things, and one of the things that's been, I know a thing that's been helpful to Zuck has been he's had kind of Mark helping him, who kind of has gone through like, this is how I freaked out here, and I wish I hadn't. So I think they went through like a similar like day in the spotlight, and Netscape, in terms of spotlight, was as big as anything for sure. And Mark was on the cover of Time and all that kind of thing, and. But they were very different personalities, though. I think, Mark Andreessen, Mark Zuckerberg is kind of both more focused and more steady, and then Mark Andreessen is just so broad in his interests and level of expertise and so forth. Like, I don't think I've ever met anybody that broad, but also doesn't have as good a temperament for management as Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg's more steady, even-keeled, and like my friend Mark goes up and down like more intensely, I think.
So Mark once told me that he manages like the Incredible Hulk. Is that an accurate description?
You talking about Andreessen?
Yes.
Yeah, he's kind of all or nothing. I was talking to him about the other day. I'm like, Mark, the thing I like about you is like it's a big part of management is confrontation. And Mark's he's completely like, he either will refuse to meet with the person ever, or he'll meet with them and he will just like unravel, like he'll confront them on everything like in the hardest possible way possible to makes people want to like burst into tears. He's so hard. So he's like avoid, or like wham. And so he is like the Incredible Hulk.
Because his image is that he's been softened. He always says, "I'm Mark 2.0."
Yeah, well, he is, like, his original mentor was Jim Clark. And so, like, Jim Clark is about the most volatile guy, like, of all times. And so Mark, like, modeled himself on that, and he was a lot like that. And so he is a lot more even than he was, but it's still, like, he's pretty, I mean, the thing that's great about him is he's so emotionally intense for a person that smart, which is, you usually don't find that in the same package, and there's something awesome about it. But he does. He still has his explosiveness. He still has the explosiveness. He's not too old for that. He can still explode when he wants to.
So how did you wind up at Netscape?
Yeah. So I knew the guy. So I'd gone to a startup that kind of. Blew to bits. It was a failed startup out of Silicon Graphics, and then I was at kind of CC Mail Lotus, and CC Mail was kind of the email thing, and then Lotus, and that all got bought by IBM. And I knew because they had been working, through the Lotus thing on Notes. It was very, very obvious that like the internet was going to blow Notes to bits as soon as I saw Mosaic. And then I knew the guys from Silicon Graphics, and I was like, Silicon Graphics had the smartest engineers ever, like that's going to be a great company. So I just got myself an interview. I kind of jammed in and got an interview, and it was funny, the recruiter told my wife, there's no way he'll get this job because he doesn't have an MBA, you need to send him back to school. But I got the job anyway, and I kind of got into Netscape and got started there.
Can you tell us about the first time you and Mark met?
Well, I actually met him in the interview. That was the kind of the first time, and we had a fine interview. The big kind of confrontation that I had with him, which kind of explains his personality then, was I was kind of responsible for the server product line when I got there, and we had 2 engineers working on servers, and I think 120 working on the client, so the browser. But the story to Wall Street was that we were going to, once Microsoft bundled the browser with the operating system, we were going to get all our money from the servers. We're going to sell, the web server for $5,000, or the secure web server with SSL for $5,000, and then the insecure web server for $1,200, and that was going to be how we're going to be this big company worth all the money. And we had 2 engineers on it, and we were building it up, and like 2 months into the job, we get our hands on Microsoft's product, which was IIS, and I benchmarked it out. It was 5 times faster than our product, and then it had more features. So it was like, uh-oh. And we knew it was going to be free, so I was like, oh, we're in a ton of trouble.
Were you guys already public?
Yeah, we were. Well, we went public through that period, so we're on our way to going public.
And was it true the main reason you went public then was because Jim Clark wanted to buy a boat?
That did factor into it.
The great Netscape moment we all hear about was simply because of a boat.
Yeah, but to Jim's credit, it turned out to be a good idea. So we go public during that period, and so me and the late great Mike Homer were kind of left to figure out, okay, what are we going to do about the server product line? And we got this idea that Microsoft was going to have to charge for back office. So if we could assemble kind of like this open back office, we could then kind of reverse the whole thing. So we did, I bought 2 companies, one for mail and then one for news groups, and then we put in the proxy server, and then I cut this deal with Informix to get their database, the database which they were charging, the relational database, which was super expensive, for $50 for unlimited web users, because nobody was going to actually use it through the web because the web was a toy. So I completely ran that by them right before their CEO went to jail. And so we had all this, and we built it all up, and we planned this massive launch in New York City with on stage and big lights and all these things, and everybody from the press was coming, and it was going to be awesome. And 2 weeks before the launch, Mark leaks the entire strategy and the entire story to not the Wall Street Journal, not the New York Times, but Computer Reseller News. Which was the best of the Computer Reseller News VAR magazines, But it was, Sarah, and the reporter was very good, and he got the whole story out of Mark, like the pricing, all the components. It was going to take on back office, and I was so upset, and so I sent him an email. I'm like, I guess we're not going to wait for the launch. That was just a 1-line email, and he replies, and CC Mike Homer, who was my boss, Jim Barksdale, who was the CEO, and Jim Clark, who was the Volatile founder. And his email said, and I don't remember it exactly, but I remember a lot of it. He said, well, I guess you really don't understand what's going on. We're getting killed, and losing billions of dollars in value every day because server product management, which was basically me, has no idea what they're doing. Next time, do the fucking interview yourself. Fuck you, Mark. And I got that email on the day he was on the cover of Time magazine.
Barefoot.
So I brought home the email and the Time magazine, and I showed it to, and you have to remember at the time, or you have to know at the time, I had 3 small children, and I really needed the job. And I showed it to my wife, and she just burst into tears. And so I was like, I'm in trouble. So that was how my relationship with Mark started.
But you decided, you thought about, do you need to leave this company then, right? But you knew something was there.
Well, I kind of, I was fortunate enough to kind of grow up in a household which was like constant, like attacking each other all the time. And for those of you who have seen my father's career, you know what I'm talking about. He is, he does tend to attack people a lot. So I kind of, it shook me a little, but I was used to it enough that I was able to kind of stick to it.
So then Netscape goes through everything it goes through, winds up selling. Last Netscape question. How do you feel about Microsoft and what they did now, years later?
Screw those bastards. So there's a couple of things that they did that, still kind of make me a little mad, although it's a long time, and all is forgiven. So, but the two things that really stick out in my mind that bother me are, one, shortly after kind of Windows 95 shipped, we did this deal with Compaq. And Compaq was the big PC manufacturer in the world. And Microsoft was saying, look, we're just going to bundle your product in with every copy of Windows and you're screwed, you're done, right? Like, so which was kind of like not the fairest way to compete, but like, okay, fine. So we competed back by going to the PC guys and saying, okay, we're going to bundle in Netscape with every product they have. And so, and remember, Microsoft had basically a monopoly on the PC operating system at the time. There was no Linux or anything like that even. And so we announced this great deal in the Wall Street Journal, and everybody loves it, and it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be a real competition. And then the next day, Compaq calls us and says, we can't do the deal. And we're like, what do you mean you can't do the deal? Like, we have a contract, it's announced in the Wall Street Journal, you have wonderful quotes, everybody loves it, they think you're brilliant. They said, Microsoft is withholding Windows 95 from us, and if we don't stop bundling you, they're not going to let us have it, and we're going to go bankrupt. Like, wow. So like that was like, I was like, wow. Like that's like so beyond. So that one still makes me mad. And then the other thing that makes me very mad, and like I said, it was war and like all that stuff. So like, and they've been doing good stuff then. But the other thing that I would say kind of irks me about those times is we had worked really, really hard, and I was a big part of the security team to make the browser safe, because we knew that code was going to be coming in from the internet, and we had this whole design around the Java sandbox, and we'd spent probably more engineering effort on kind of figuring out how to secure it and not let things get out to your computer as we did on anything else. And then Microsoft, to attack us, came out with ActiveX. And we looked at it and we were like, it's going to be Virus City. Like, it's going to be like horrible. Like, this is like, we're opening up the internet in a very, very dangerous way. And we kind of went to press with that, and they came out and they said, they're a bunch of whiners. They're a bunch of whiners. They just can't compete. ActiveX is perfectly safe. And we knew they were not telling the truth. And so it just went, and now, like, it's Virus City. Just like, but it was obvious that was what was going to happen. Like, there was no question. Everybody knew it. But it was so complicated to describe. The details of it were so complicated. And Microsoft was so good at twisting the technical facts. And so those were the two things that I thought they did that were, not really cool. But, other than that, they executed very well. And, like, you have to give them a lot of credit for the things they did. And I don't have a beef with any of them now. I'm all better.
Given all of the history of that, a lot of people want to believe that the best product wins in Silicon Valley. Do you think it does?
Well, so the thing that we always say, and it depends where it is. It doesn't. I mean, clearly the history is it doesn't quite always win. There's a lot of cases where it hasn't. But one thing that does tend to happen is the winning product always eventually becomes the best product, because you do end up with more resources on it. Like Oracle, like people say, wasn't the best relational database at the time. That Sybase was better and had very row level locking and all that, war over that nonsense. But Oracle eventually got better because Oracle won, and they just got more engineers, and they got to a better product. So in that case, an edge in sales and marketing, beat the product edge initially enough for them to get to the better product. It's more, the world has become more transparent than when I was a kid, and so it's more likely now that the best product wins than it was then, but it's not always the case.
All right, I want to get into LoudCloud and Opsware, which is, I think one of the most interesting periods of your history, although it's probably the one people know about the least from when things was enterprise. So when I first got here, I got here in late 90s and was absolute nobody working for a small publication. But I do remember that when you guys were going public, everyone at the time just heaped onto it. This is Mark Andreessen's next company. This is going to reignite the markets. I mean, every press story was putting so much pressure on that IPO. And then Business Week kind of does this inside story and calls it the IPO from hell.
Yeah. The IPO from hell.
It could not
the Wall
have been
Street Journal had an A1 story on. Yeah, that was probably and they put out that story while we were on the road, the IPO from hell while we're trying to get the IPO done. So I should probably go back a step to describe. So let me give you the quick tour of it. We found the company September 1999. By November, we raised money at $66 million post-money valuation. We, by January, have booked $12 million in business. By June, we raised money at a $700 million pre-money valuation. 9 months old. Then the dot-com bust goes into full effect, and our customers start going out of business at an incredibly high rate, incredibly high rate. And all private market money shuts down. And we were, because we had grown so fast, and because we were kind of the first cloud computing company, we built out this cloud infrastructure, so we had a high burn rate.
You were helping companies get on the web, essentially.
Yeah, we were helping companies get on the web, and and at that time you have to understand the climate was very different. Venture capitalists used to ask me questions like, "What would you do if capital were free?" Which is kind of like asking a kid, what would you do if ice cream had the same nutritional value as broccoli? It's kind of like, well, that's not really a good question to ask an entrepreneur. So, we're burning like $20 million a quarter. We're still growing very fast at that point, but our customers are going out of business and we can't raise money. And basically, the only way to raise money is to go public. So we go public, 18 months old, $2 million in trailing revenue, 340 employees, with a plan to do $75 million the next year. And so we get on the road.
And this was not only post-bust, but post-September 11th, was it not?
No, pre-September 11th. So this is March 2000.
And PayPal was right after. Okay,
we went first, I think, and then PayPal. So we were March 2001.
I remember you guys were pretty much the only two that made it out. So
yeah, we were the two internet companies that went public, and so that's that situation. And you got to remember, it was my first time CEO, right? And so I start the company, all this happened, and then all of a sudden I'm going public.
And we should say, you've written in your blog about how when you guys were raising money for LoudCloud, people would say, well, when are you going to bring in the grown-up CEO? The philosophy you guys have was not the prevailing philosophy at the time.
Oh, no. So then very early on. Actually, one of the partners at the venture capital firm that I raised money from asked me when we were going to get a real CEO. So I already had that question over my head. And we couldn't raise money privately. It was funny, we tried to raise money privately, and my friend Bill Campbell, I asked him, I'm like, can you, we talked to one of the investors, and I'm like, Bill, can you back channel it? And he calls me up, he's like, Ben, I talked to him. And I'm like, what'd they say, Bill? Well, Ben, they thought you were smoking crack. And so that's kind of my situation. So I have to take it public or go bankrupt. I had 6 weeks of cash when we went to hit the road. We have comparables. So when you go public, you have comparables. Here are the companies that they should value us, at similar multiples to. And the comparables were Storage Networks, Exodus, and Akamai. And from the time that we set the initial we went on the road to the time we priced, they lost half their value in 3 weeks. They lost half their value. The NASDAQ was down every day we were on the road, and this Business Week article comes out with a week before pricing that says, the IPO from hell. Then the night before we priced...
And there was some debate about, they kind of broke the agreement.
Yeah, and they broke it. So they were supposed to not publish it till after the IPO, and it was supposed to be a puff piece because we gave them access.
Yeah.
So that didn't go well. And then the day before we priced, Yahoo fired Tim Kugel. And so that was like the environment. And then, but by some miracle, we were able to get the IPO done. The initial price was $10. 3 weeks later, we priced it at $6. And that was like going public for me. It was just awesome, the IPO, yay!
So was there ever a point where you were like, this is just, because was it that there was no other alternative? Because you couldn't have thought, this is going great.
Yeah, I knew that we had already tried to, here's how hard we tried to raise money privately. I met with the Saudi Arabian prince who had invested in Apple and so forth. I went down to see him. And he wouldn't invest. So nobody was investing.
When the Saudi Arabians are out.
No, it was.
But why did you
difficult.
still believe in the company? I have to think that at any point in Silicon Valley history, there's a lot of people that at that point, they're just like, this isn't going to work, market's changed, this isn't a viable concept anymore.
Well, I don't know how much belief I had, but I knew that I had kind of gotten everybody into the boat with me. So it wasn't so much that I didn't want to quit. I wanted to quit every day I was in that job. I felt like throwing up when I woke up in the morning.
So you know what it's like having a baby now.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like I was pregnant. But, I'd hired every employee. And they all trusted me. I'd raised all the money. I talked every investor into putting their money in. I had given stock to, my friends and relatives, and they were all excited about the prospects for the company. When it went public, a lot of my friends from high school, bought the stock because I was running the company. And so I felt like I could die, but I couldn't quit. And one of the horrible things about being founder CEO is it's the one job you really can't quit. Or if you do quit, you're a punk. So, I didn't want to be a punk. So I just kept, pedaling. But it was rough. That was running LoudCloud, and it didn't stop there, right? That was LoudCloud.
Yeah.
LoudCloud, by the time LoudCloud was 2.5 years old, I had sold the LoudCloud part of the business, and I had to change it into another business. So the next thing that happened was LoudCloud was going to go bankrupt. So I raised $160 million in the IPO, but I burned, we burned through that, and we couldn't stop the burn because the customers kept going out of business, and so we were headed towards bankruptcy. So then I had to, I sold the services part of the business and all the cash burn to EDS, and then I had to lay off, probably, another third of the employees, and then I kept the remaining 80 employees, and we became a software company, a publicly traded software company with no customers and no revenue, which was another trick.
And that was when you became Opsware.
That's when we became Opsware, yeah. So that was hard. But it was good, that kind of stuff, it makes you strong. Eventually, 5 years later, we sold it to Hewlett-Packard for, $1.6 billion, and
not a bad exit.
Which was I'm still shocked by that whole thing. I still wake up in the middle of the night going, we're going to run out of money.
I still have nightmares about waiting tables. I imagine it's the same way. You still have the nightmares where you're at Opsware about to go bankrupt.
Oh, yeah. No, I'll wake up in a cold sweat, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not running Opsware anymore. I can calm down.
So, not only were you guys operating with that sort of crazy but necessary pivot, but you were also operating in the post-Enron world, when a lot changed for being a public company.
Oh, yeah.
So, how did that impact you? I mean, I know Mark once told me that like you guys you and Horowitz and a lot of the board members started buying up shares to signal confidence in the company, and you got sued for insider buying. Like there was just anything you did, you guys almost got punished.
Yeah, we did. We got sued for insider buying. Class action lawsuit. That was the first funny thing that happened to us. Then, one of the things I'll never forget is, so one of the laws that came out while we were public was, or kind of right before we went public, was this thing called Regulation FD, which is fair disclosure. And what it said was, you had to tell everybody at the same time. If you were going to tell anybody, you had to tell everybody. And and the problem with that is, like, it didn't really apply to hedge funds, so they could like set up rumors and various things about the stock. So one of the things that happened to me is a hedge fund put out a rumor that we had lost a big deal at Citigroup and it was going to cause us to whiff our quarter. And then they put out the rumor, and then they called all of our investors, top investors, and asked them had they heard the rumor. And then they got a reporter to write the story. And so all my investors called me and they said, well, did you lose the big deal at Citigroup, or are you going to whiff the quarter? Well, I'm under Reg FD. So I couldn't say anything. And the only thing I could do, theoretically, was issue a press release, but you can't issue a press release about losing a deal. And there was no deal at Citigroup. It was all false. But the stock dropped 25% on the rumor. And it had dropped so far that the customers started to get nervous, and it almost caused us to whiff the quarter. So like that was like what it was like for a little company to be public. And when people say, well, why don't little companies go public? Well, that's why. Because like you can get put out of business by, hedge funds who are just essentially manipulating the stock. So like that was hard. But it was easy compared to going public, with only 6 weeks of cash. So I just,
Do you think the regulations need to change around public companies, or is it just the game?
No, I think it needs to be more symmetrical. So what's happened is a series of regulations from, it has everything to do with like the fractional ownership to the new trading rules to Reg FD that have kind of conspired to make short-term trading very cheap. So it used to be there was a big tax on making a short-term trade so that you wouldn't do it, and so everybody was a long-term investor. And that's completely flipped where that's been removed. And then it's got to be symmetrical so that the company and the investors are kind of on the same footing when it comes to disclosure and all that. And I think that arresting a lot of the hedge fund guys for insider trading is actually a very good first step, because none of them had ever been arrested before, even though they've been breaking the law for years. Whereas public company CEOs, a lot of my peers went to jail on stock option accounting, which was a much kind of more esoteric, less high impact crime than basically lying to public investors and manipulating stocks.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the IPO climate right now?
Well, I think it's been like better than it has been in the past, and there have been some tricky ones. There have been some kind of groundbreaking IPOs, and that usually, if you look at the whole history of the IPO market, there have been very few new technology companies that have ever gone public with like $1 billion in revenue. And so that's been kind of a new thing. So I think that the ecosystem has learned how to kind of price and size those things, which has not been something that had been well done. There just hasn't been a long track record. So that I think will get more stable. But it's, it's okay. It still has the issues that I spoke about.
Do you think Groupon fucked up?
Well, no. Look, who am I to say that anybody fucked up when I went public? When I priced at 10 and went out at 6. So like I'm the last person to criticize somebody else's IPO. Look, I think companies who are private, and I felt this, aren't well enough versed in what it means to be public from a regulatory framework standpoint, and what public company controls mean, and what public reporting means and public disclosure means. And it's really different than running a private company. So I think that to some extent, most companies make some mistakes like Groupon made, but they're just not like in center spotlight in the same way.
Right. Would you ever run a public company again?
Well, I would try not to. I didn't. That sucks. No. Look, there were some very good things. I think that, on the other hand, if you look at Opsware as a company, a huge reason that we were able to kind of be the #1 company in the space and not the #2 company in the space was that we were public. I bought 4 companies when I was public, which I could never have bought when I was private. And those companies really helped us win the market. So there are real advantages to being public, but you've got to, I would recommend going to Joe Grunfest and Cy Lawrence Directors College. I would recommend really understanding what you're doing because it's not the same. And I'll tell you what, like when you have $100 million and you go to trial, you're going to jail. Like guaranteed. Everybody thinks you're guilty. It's impossible to make that much money without like stealing it in the eyes of everybody who's not us. So like, don't fool yourself. And you better like protect yourself if you're going to be a public company CEO.
So you look back on the time, obviously, at Opsware, it sounds like it's one of the hardest things you've done in your career.
Oh yeah, definitely the hardest.
Is there any sort of war story since where you look back on it as the best time of your career, or just no?
Well, it's the best time in terms of stories. I got some good stories. I could tell you stories all day. It'll make your toes curl. So in that way, it was good. And look, the people at Opsware, the people I work with there, ride or die, I still love all of them.
You guys have brought a lot of them to Andreessen Horowitz.
Well, a lot of them did, and every one of them, if they need a job, they know who to call. Everybody who stayed with me, the people who quit don't call me because I will not return it. But the people who stayed with me, absolutely, like I'll do whatever I can for them because like they went through it all, like to get it to that point, and it's incredible. The pressure they were on from their families and their friends going like, you're an idiot, your company's trading at 35 cents a share, they're going bankrupt, didn't you read the paper? And for them to listen to me and stay with it, that was something that I don't know if I'll ever replicate in my life.
How do you keep people motivated in that situation?
Yeah, well, that is a great question. That's probably one of the things that I help young CEOs with most often is when like, okay, the wheels fall off, what do you do? And this was probably one of my biggest learnings as CEO because when I was a young CEO, I always felt like, one, it was my job to keep everybody really positive. And then two, whatever I was feeling, the people who worked for me would have a hard time handling that feeling because I could barely handle it. And so I shouldn't let them know the horror that I was seeing. And both those things turned out to be really wrong, like dramatically wrong. And it was funny, my brother-in-law is the one who actually tipped me off to it because he worked for Pacific Bell, now I think they're AT&T now, but as a
according
climbing
to the Giant
poles,
Stadium.
climbing poles and like hooking stuff up and that kind of stuff. And I knew one of the executives at AT&T, and I asked him, I was like, oh, do you know like Chuck Smith? Does he ever come to talk to you? And he goes, oh yeah, well Chuck comes by now and again, and he'll come by and talk to us, give us a pep talk, blow a little sunshine up my ass. And I thought to myself, oh, that's what it sounds like when I'm being positive. And so, after that, I really changed my style as CEO. And, I would talk about what I saw as the opportunity, but every problem we had, everything that, we needed to fix, I would get in front of the whole company and I would say, look, here's what's wrong, here's what's broken, and what's going to get us into trouble. And at one time, I was like, we're losing too many deals to Blade Logic. They're like kicking our butt. If we don't fix the product, it's going to be, that's it, like Katie barred the door. If we can't beat these guys, we need to go home. So what are we going to do? And here's the plan. And that was far more motivating to be able to actually work on the problems and solve it and get after it and do things rather than have it all on my shoulders. And you know what? It didn't bother them near as badly as it bothered me when we lost a deal or when the stock price went down or when an investor bailed out. That was much harder on me because it was all eyes on me. I'm running the company. So that that's probably the biggest lesson I learned around just motivation in general. It's like, people, the people who work at tech companies in Silicon Valley are like super brilliant, incredibly capable. And the last thing a person like that wants is to not be able to get in the game and like help fix what's wrong. And let me tell you, every company in Silicon Valley, like including Facebook, including Square, including Twitter, including all of them, has got shit horribly wrong with it. Horribly, horribly broken and wrong. And everybody in the company knows it, and the CEO knows it. So it's better to talk about it. Because that's how companies are. Like, stuff just breaks. If you have like 500 or 1,000 people trying to do something, it's not all going to be perfect. It's going to be ugly. And you get that out there and you let people work on it. And that's probably the number one thing I would say about motivating people when stuff goes wrong. Because if you blow sunshine up their ass, they'll be like, does the CEO even know how bad it is?
Well, it's one of two things. Either you don't know or you're lying.
Right, you're stupid, and people said that about me when I was CEO before I figured this out. They're like, Ben is either stupid or he's lying. And I was like, well, I actually know. So am I lying? That's
Which
one of
is
the things.
better?
Am I lying? And I was like, I thought I was just being positive.
So I sort of indirectly learned something about you as a CEO when I was first becoming a CEO. I was actually thinking originally when I started this company that I would hire a CEO. And I had breakfast with Dick Costello, and he talked me out of it single-handedly. And
Good for Dick.
And I think so. My employees might beg to differ, given what day it is. But he talked me out of it, and certainly I'd covered entrepreneurs long enough that message resonated because I have a very specific vision for the company, and I've seen people hand that over and it not go well. But the way he talked me out of it was, one of the things he said is that he was teaching this CEO class, and he would let me come to the class, and it happened to be the next day.
Right.
And I learned that actually it was this course that he developed over several months with you to teach at Twitter on how to manage at Twitter, because he inherited, sort of this messed up passive-aggressive
heterogeneous culture.
Heterogeneous, we'll call it that, when you oust two CEOs in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And he came to you and said, I know how to manage this company, but I don't know how to make sure people are managing it the way I want to. And you helped him build this course that he teaches. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think Dick maybe even gives me too much credit on that. So it was actually an interesting thing because, we've got an investment in Twitter, but we're like a passive investor. And, I was talking to Dick at one of the conferences we went to together, and, and he was kind of taking me through things. I was like, and he was telling me, I love the blog, Ben, and so forth. I was like, look, hey, we've got money in the company. If you ever want to spend time, we can spend time. And so he's like, great, I'll take you up on that. So we sat down, and he's kind of taking me through. I'm like, well, tell me, what's bothering you about Twitter? He's like, I got these issues. It's like, we've got engineers, and, we've got 8 versions of the same exact piece of code doing the exact same thing, and they all have their own bugs and they all work slightly differently, and it just keeps happening. And then I've got managers who will all agree on something, and then they'll go tell their team, well, I don't like this, but the powers that be are making me do it. And he's like, and the company's big now and it's pervasive, and it's very frustrating. So he knew exactly what was wrong, and I'm like, well, Dick, I was like, what does your training program look like? And he looked at me, and I was like, there you go. You got to train them. And that's a lot of what I end up doing. And that was the biggest part of the input, from me. But it's one of those things where when you're CEO of a company like Twitter or one of these companies, there are so many things to do, and you kind of know in your gut what's important, but you don't even give yourself permission to do what's important. And so as soon as I said it, he was like, tell me more. And I was like, well, look, my management training went like this. This is what I expect you motherfuckers to do, and if you don't, I'm being your ass. And and that was it. So just make a list of things that you don't like. It's like that new Kanye song, this is what I don't like. And he even mentions some of the managers at Twitter in that song. Those of you who know the song will know what I'm talking about, and then those who don't, just listen to it and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But, he kind of immediately immediately he already knew that's what he needed to do, but it was just kind of me going, look, I went through this and here's how I did it. And now they probably have, one of the best training programs in all of Silicon Valley. And that's just a credit to, there's a guy who already could do it. And I just told him, yeah, I went through that problem. I had all those issues, and this is how I fixed it.
Well, and people who've read what I've written for the last couple of years know I'm obviously a big believer in entrepreneurship outside the Valley. But this is one of the things to me that makes Silicon Valley very unique. Everything you learned at Opsware, which is a company no one, most kids coming to the Valley have never even heard of, you passed on to Twitter. I have breakfast with Dick Costello. Yeah. I wind up at this thing with Dennis Crowley and David Karp and Gina Bean and all of these great product founders who are trying to be better CEOs. Yeah. And we sort of learn all those things. And I've run into people who are at the course with me later, and it's like, it'll always be like, oh my God, that changed my life. And there's such a cult of these sort of bad boy founder CEOs that you confuse the bad behavior with good management somehow. And I feel like there's a resurgence now that a lot of people who are the founder CEOs who were able to stay in charge are now really trying to learn good management. It's kind of come back a little bit.
Yeah, I think, one of the tricky things, right, is that if you don't have winning product, it doesn't matter how well your company is managed. You're done, right? So you've got to get winning product. And winning product, even in bad management, and Twitter is a great example of this kind of, going into Dick, they had a lot of management challenges, and even Jack, who's the original CEO, goes like, oh, I'm so ashamed, and he's correcting a lot of that now that he's CEO of Square, but Twitter still succeeded, with all the management issues they had, and so people kind of go, well, why even bother with management if that's the case? But the truth is, there's several things that are very important. Is one, if you get into trouble and you have bad management, your company will probably die. The people just quit. They're not bonded to it. They don't like working there. They never liked working there, and that's that. It's a wrap. But the other thing, which I think is a bigger thing, which is one of the things that I try to talk to people about, and why I write the blog, and a lot of reason why I founded the firm is, even if you succeed at building a company that everybody hates working at, then what have you done? You just made a whole lot of people a lot more miserable in their lives. And, and it's true, you laugh, but it's really true. And people spend, how many, all of you guys, you probably spend 12, 14, 16 hours a day at work. That's your waking life. And so if it sucks, then your life sucks. And if you're running a company like that, that's what you're doing. And so to me, the most important thing that we do at the firm, and the most important thing you can do as CEO, is make it a good place to work for as long as you exist. And so I've been trying to, that's an important thing that I try and, work with CEOs on. And this is what I like about Dick, is he really believes that too. And it's a great thing, when it happens. So,
so let's talk about you guys starting the firm. I know that at the time, I know certainly Mark, and I imagine you were thinking about different things that you guys could do next. Was starting another product company on that list?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I think we thought about it. Although, we had various ideas for products and things like that, and we talked about things, and, and, Mark and I are an old married couple a little bit, so and we kind of had to think, do we really want to work together again? But
wait, tell me what was the pro and con list for you in working with Mark again?
Well, the pro, the big pros with Mark are, one, he's one of the smartest guys in the world, literally one of the smartest guys in the world. And then two, friends like Mark, I count on the peace sign, 1 to 2. That's a Prince quote. And the cons are just he's super volatile, and and he is a pain in my ass, and I'm a pain in his ass. The thing that makes the working relationship work is almost every day I really upset him, and he really upsets me to the point where we want to knuckle up. Oh yeah, all the time.
What was it today?
We're always stepping on each other's toes. Well, there was issue about a company, that we're invested in, and like what they should do, and they've got acquisition offers and this and that and the other, and like he said some things that like kind of like, made me wobble a little bit, and but that's the whole thing. Is every time I get mad, I know I'm learning something, and vice versa. So, like that's also the good and the bad of it. But like, do you want to go through that drama to get to the goodness? That was a big thing. Do I want that drama in my life? But I had such a hard time building LoudCloud and Opsware. It was just so hard as a kind of founder, CEO, kind of, that I just felt like I could have used, and I was fortunate, like I had Bill Campbell helping me, who's like unbelievable. But I just felt like there could have been a little bit better infrastructure to do that. And I thought about the people who didn't have Bill Campbell helping them, and like what it must have been like. And so I just felt like there was real gap in the market for a firm, for the technical founder to run the company. Like how, and if you think about, well, what does a technical founder need to be a CEO? It's a lot, right? Like you've got to develop the skill set, which is a big skill set. I mean, good Lord, like how do you hire an executive? How do you build a sales and marketing organization? How do you do all this stuff? And then you like need a network, like how do you know these people to hire? And how do you know like 100 engineers? And how do you deal with the press and all these things that you don't know how to do? You just know how to build a product. But you kind of like get thrown into the pool and you have to learn it all. And then if things go wrong, like you feel like you're going to have a heart attack. So I just felt like, wouldn't it be nice if there was kind of an organization that was really designed for that person, like explicitly for that person. And so that to me was such a compelling idea that I was like gung-ho about it. And then Mark had, Mark came at it from the other way, which is he had like created this like massively comprehensive investment strategy, from top to bottom about, the various stages and like how many companies matter and like what are the breakthroughs and how do you get into them and so forth. So like we thought that combination would be a really interesting thing.
Did you view yourself as disrupting the venture industry?
Well, I think so. What do you guys think? Maybe so. Hey? Yeah? No?
Well, one guy thinks you disrupted the venture
one guy.
industry.
So maybe not.
No, for the live stream, let's just say everybody just raised their hand, Ben.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I think so. By certainly the reactions we're getting from other firms and from entrepreneurs.
Do you mean your haters when you say reactions from other firms?
Jealousy is just love and hate at the same time.
How do you get along with other VCs?
So this is funny. So I get along with them very well. So there are VCs that I really, really like. Anil Boozary is one of them who I work with all the time on various deals. I just got off the phone with Ted Schlein, who I get along with very, very well. So there are a lot of VCs I get along with. I'm a bad cultural fit for investing. You may have noticed, and there's a good reason for this. So if you think about the investing environment, it's this weird co-opetition thing because you compete for deals, but you work on deals together. So you're kind of partners, but you're competitors. And I don't come from that culture. I come from enterprise software, right? Like, who the top dog in enterprise software is? Larry Ellison, right? Like, ain't no co-opetition in Larry Ellison, right? Like, all you have to do is mention like anybody who's close to a competitor, and it's like his head will blow off, like, and he'll go like bananas, like
speaking
at D,
of
right?
Anil, we saw that at D.
Yeah, he just went absolutely bananas. It's like it's on, baby. It's like you stepped on my shoes. Let's go. And so for me, and then also I listen to Little Wheezy. And so sometimes, the venture capitalists will come at me, being friendly, and, hey, with the peace sign. And, to me, the peace sign is just the trigger and the middle finger, So that's the main. That's from Wheezy.
Does it bother you when they talk shit about you? Because they don't do it to your face. They do it to people like me.
It's anonymous. So yeah, so that's and you're alluding a little bit to when I called them crybabies. Which gets actually another thing. The one thing that does bother me a little bit about some VCs and some angels. So one of the things that's happened a lot since we've been in the industry is we get a lot of people calling the press anonymously. There are probably more anonymous quotes about us in the press than any other entity right now. And Sarah calls me up and she goes, Ben, I got a tip from 6 different anonymous angels saying that you're doing this. And I'm going, if they don't like what I'm doing, why don't they just come out and say it? If I don't like something somebody's doing, I just come out and say, I put my name on it. And the reason that bothers me so much is the number one thing we look for in an entrepreneur, and the number one thing that I encourage and I try and help people develop, is courage. And the reason that that's important, and it's very, very important, and it goes back to Aristotle. So Aristotle said, courage is the first virtue. And the reason it's the first virtue is if you don't have it, then you don't have any virtue. Because all these other things, honesty, integrity, whatever, don't ever get activated when they're important if you don't have courage. It's easy to be honest, unless it's going to cost you your job or your marriage or something you care about, then it's hard to be honest. So without courage, you don't have anything. You don't have integrity. You don't have anything. You're just you're a zero character person. And so when people who are supposed to be coaching entrepreneurs, angel investors, or VCs walk around giving anonymous tips to reporters about stuff they don't think is right, and those guys are advising the people who I'm working with, that really, that's something that pissed me off. So I'm not having it, and I'm gonna call them on it, and they come at me again. You anonymous quote me?
I can't wait to get an anonymous quote tomorrow. We had a slight incident in the history of Pando Daily that was unfortunate and very upsetting. And I remember I talked to Reid Hoffman, who's one of our investors, about it. And Reid, who actually is going to be our guest in August, is super one of those people who sees the good in people, I think. I mean, he's just a very positive guy. Yeah. But he said to me, he said, I think you've learned something I learned early in my career, which most people are only as nice as it's convenient for them to be.
Yeah. They smile in your face all the time. They want to take your place. The backstabbers. Sorry. That's the OJs.
We're actually getting freestyling. Okay, so just a few more sort of topical things I want to get through real quick, and then we'll get to questions. I want to talk to you a little bit about the place of women in tech. And I sort of half roll my eyes in saying this because it is one of those things people are always let's raise awareness, and I kind of think that's bullshit. But you are a big champion of women in tech, and you always, when you write about CEOs that aren't bad CEOs, you say she instead of he. Yeah. And you gave an amazing talk about women in tech that your wife shared with me. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how you view the landscape. Do you think VCs are sexist? Do you think there's a problem? Why are we don't have more women who are starting companies?
Well, so it's harder. It's tricky. So, and there are better people to speak on this than me. First, let me say, because I don't really know what it's like to be a woman. But
that doesn't stop a lot of people from talking on this, by the way.
Yeah. So my experience as CEO was that it was a challenge. It was a real challenge for women. So in kind of these organizations, these tech organizations, that was different than men in that, the basic kind of cultural and communication styles were different enough that it spooked men. And so it wasn't what I would call sexism in the way that you might think of it with just men going we're better than women. It wasn't that kind of sexism. It was much more men being uncomfortable with women to the point where they isolated them. So, and the best example I can give is, so one of the things that you really like in management in a company is the ability to confront people and talk about what's wrong and get stuff out on the table, because that makes things flow. And in life, women tend to be better at that than men. It's much more what happens in kind of female culture than in male culture, or maybe female anthropology, in the sense that men, and there's there's men can know each other for 30 years and talk all day long and never say anything, right? Like there's no, and like women have a conversation and they go through all kind of like what's going, like, and like nasty stuff that's happening in their lives and like divorce and all these kinds of things, and like it's really intense. And so in business, the way that manifests itself, for like, one example that I had is, I had one brilliant woman working for me, and like in a meeting, she said to her boss, gee, when you cut me out, when you cut me off in the meeting, like it made me a little uncomfortable. Could you like let me finish what I'm saying the next time? And that's all she meant by it, right? Like that was just like a normal. And women, in like if it was a company or a group run by a woman, like it would have been a nothing comment. It would have been like, oh, gotcha, won't do it again. For the man, it was like, he comes to my, she hates me, she is out to get me, like he freaked him out, because a man would never say that to another man in a meeting. Like he just wouldn't do it because like it doesn't like hit the bar of like maximal, like, important enough to talk about, which is actually very unhealthy in an organization, that things bother you and just build up and fester as opposed to you dealing with them on the spot. So it just makes it complicated if it's mostly male organization for a woman to operate. And that's bad, because the cultures are actually much better if you have a lot of women, and it swings more to the more confrontational, more out in the open culture. And so for me, as somebody who invests in companies, it's really important to me that I do whatever I can to at least make the women feel confident to be themselves. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the great women CEOs, Diane Green, right, like, or Meg Whitman, or the really, really successful Judy Estrin, have completely mastered the male protocol. Like they've got it down. Like you couldn't tell, you close your eyes, you don't know if you're talking to a man or a woman if you just like read the transcript, right? Like it is like they've got it nailed, mm-hmm. Which they had to do to run those organizations. But like, I don't think that's necessarily optimal, because you lose the honesty, you lose the confrontation, you lose the out in the open, you lose the transparency when you make it go the other way. I'd rather the men learn the protocol, and so that's why I come at it that way. But it's kind of a little push, I would say. But I know, and it's funny because I get criticism on it from men sometimes, and I always tell them.
Is it, Sophia said that you never use she if you're describing a bad CEO. Is that true?
Well, the way I started is I tried not to use she for the bad stuff, because I didn't want to get it twisted. But now I just tend to use she for everything, because I like the way it works. I also like there seems like such a weird, like just as a writer, it doesn't sound very good. And then he or she is just like, ugh. Like you can't even read it. He or she. It's like like some kind of clinical piece. So then you have to decide: is it going to be he? Is it going to be she? And so I'm going with she, because everybody else seems to go another way.
All right. So just three very topical things I want to ask you about. So Yammer, $1 billion.
Yeah.
Is that happening? First of all, Wall Street Journal said definitively it was last week. Week later, there's no deal still.
Yeah. So I don't know. So I do not know if Yammer is definitively done or not. I do know, look, Yammer is a modern architecture in a very important space, in what looks like it's going to be an important market, and a market where Microsoft generates, has got a, multi-billion-dollar a year product in SharePoint that's on kind of the last generation architecture. So, if you've got that kind of revenue, paying $1 billion to like grow it and preserve it doesn't seem totally crazy to me. Like it seems like a pretty rational acquisition. So, the multiple on it, if it was a standalone company, is probably high, but like Microsoft's got like incredible reach, and will probably, whatever Yammer is doing, will, Microsoft is the kind of company that could 10x that overnight.
Mm-hmm. Now, as I wrote last week, as a sort of power user of Yammer, I mean, our staff lives in it almost 24 hours a day between the two coasts. Yeah. It's very good for newsrooms. Probably it's actually one of the best instances of it working really well. I mean, I understand why he's going to sell for $1 billion if he does, but like, I mean, I'm not happy about it. I mean, and in general, as someone who's
You're
covered,
not happy about it. Why?
because I think Microsoft will fuck it up, and it's not a done
Come on,
product.
Microsoft, get it together. You can do it.
You think they won't?
Well, so Microsoft at one time was like a very good software company with like incredibly smart people.
Was that when they were using illegal tactics to run you guys out of the market, or before that?
Yeah, I mean, there are still like some very, very smart people at Microsoft. I'll definitely say that. You know, I've worked with, Satya, who runs the cloud stuff, is like, that guy is smart in the enterprise business. And I imagine it's probably in his domain. So I want to assume, I mean, there are companies who would buy it, who you'd go, okay, that's it, it's over. But like, I think they'll do things with it. I mean, we sold Skype to them, and they're doing, the product is evolving. Like they're doing some good things with it. They're doing some things that, like, unless you're like a full-in Microsoft customer, would probably be a little annoying. But they've improved. The product is better now than when we sold it to them, I would say.
But on some level, I mean, we've been waiting for a long time for there to be another important wave of enterprise software companies.
Yeah.
On some level, wouldn't it be a crime if Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, IBM just bought all these guys out at $1 billion just when this market's getting serious?
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think my friend Anil at Workday is.
They're not selling.
Yeah, I don't think he's selling. I think he thinks he can do it, and there are other companies that I think are kind of in a also, and it depends on market position too. I mean, Yammer is like David Sachs is a great CEO. Like Yammer is an awesome product. But from a market standpoint, it is also true that they're kind of a piece of a large category with a huge number of competitors in it. So building kind of the next Oracle out of Yammer is a more complicated thing than, say, building it out of Workday or even building it out of a GitHub or something like that. There are companies that have a little, it's to quote kind of Peter Thiel, that are in less competitive businesses, that are in more kind of monopoly businesses. And so I do think that, that one's a little bit, in some ways, that there's a logic to it getting sold.
What about Box? Some people say that files are the photos of the enterprise social network, and Box is a prime player there. I mean,
Yeah.
You think there's a lot of people who want that?
Oh, who want to acquire it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, look, there's a lot of people, I mean, who are building things and want to acquire it and so forth in that area. And then the question is what, for them and for Aaron is, okay, are you willing to step up to the big market? Because probably the file sharing market is not going to be a standalone business forever. And, the thing that it replaces in the old world is, kind of Novell, like Novell and then SharePoint, but Novell NetWare was kind of the first thing like that. And, eventually even NetWare had to get past network functionality, and they had a much bigger lock on the market than Box does. So they're going to have to either grow into the category or sell to somebody who is willing to do that. And, that's a big strategic decision for them to make over time, but they're doing great now.
Mm-hmm. Are you still as bullish on Foursquare as you were when you did the first investment?
Oh, yeah. Have you seen the new product?
I've not personally played with it. I've never been a big Foursquare fan.
Okay,
I was the only person at TechCrunch who was not just drinking full gallons of Foursquare Kool-Aid, because I don't like people to know where I am.
Yeah, well,
And
there
I
you
have
go,
told
yeah.
Dennis this.
Yeah.
He needs to give me more to give up where I am.
Look, so...
I don't see Ben Horowitz check-ins everywhere either.
Yeah, you do. I've checked in here right now.
This one's slightly public.
Yeah, no, I am checked in. No, I think it's going actually extremely well there, and the new product is really and the traction that it's gotten has been quite incredible in terms of, like, the increase in engagement has been super intense, and the product continues to grow. It's continued to grow very fast, but now, like, they're on a kind of an exponential engagement growth, which is really awesome. And the reason is they flipped it from basically writers to readers. And so Foursquare, like the trick of Foursquare was to get a big enough data set of check-ins so that it would be interesting for people who were just wanted to figure out what to do. And figuring out what to do by going, here is what like people who I know and people who use Foursquare have been to and recommend and like make a list out of, is like way better than anything else that you can get to figure out what to do in any city that you drop into. And like it really is awesome. Like if you go to like, you know, I went to Paris recently and like just like everything, and there were like lists from like all these like smart people I knew who like did way more traveling than me, and I was like, oh, they just said go to this, you know, Shakespeare bookstore over here. And like it was awesome. Like it just made the whole trip so much better. So like I think it's a real thing. And they're working hard, and they're building, you know, a really one of the outstanding engineering organizations, I think, in high tech right now. So I'm like super bullish on Foursquare.
Okay, last question before we go to questions from the audience. Square, you guys are one of 2 of the big 5 firms who've said that your biggest regret is not investing in Square, and yet you keep not investing at each round.
Well, the price keeps going up. Yeah, so look.
But other anonymous VCs tell me you'll pay any price.
Yeah, anonymous VCs, exactly. So I'll explain both of those. On the first one, so we passed on Square in the first round, which is I think the $40 million round, which seems, at least in retrospect, to probably have been a mistake. And the big mistake we made on that was we went for a lack of weakness over strength, back to what I said earlier. And so the big strength was Jack, who is like, you know, Jack is Jack, and he's one of the great product designers of our time. The problems with it were, like, Jack wasn't actually CEO, Jack McElvey was CEO. And, you know, Jack McElvey's previous job was he was running a glass blowing company. And his pitch said, just let's put it this way, a lot of things kind of made me kind of nervous about like how seriously they were taking things like distribution and fraud and all these things. But like eventually Jack ran the company, and like it's built it into what it is, which is awesome. So we missed that. Now, like since then, because Jack is CEO and he's so compelling and so forth, the valuation has just been impressive. You know,
some would say outrageous.
Well, impressive, and you know, it's only outrageous if they don't keep like making it go up. So you know, for whatever reasons, you know, we decided not to invest. That doesn't mean that the people who did aren't smart. You know, and on us, like paying, you know, any valuation or high valuations. This is actually. Do you want to know what happens there? So I'll explain it to everybody. So when I used to sell software. And we've done lots of analysis on this, on what we pay and so forth, and it's all mostly nonsense. And I'll give you a couple examples. But when I used to sell enterprise software, and we'd lose a deal, and you know our sales rep would go and we'd lose a deal. Right? There's only 2 reasons you ever lose a deal. One is you have a worse product, and the other is you get outsold. Like that's why you lose a deal. And so when you go to investigate the deal, the sales rep kind of has 2 choices. One, he can say it's the product, and that's a rough one, because if he's wrong, like, you know, like we're going to unravel it to the cows come home, because that's a big problem if your product sucks, and it's hard to fix. And then the other is, well, okay, did we get outsold? So what they always said was the competitor gave it away. They gave the product away. They gave it away. And I used to call the customer, and I'd be like, well, if we matched their price, would you have gone with us? And you know what they would say? You did match their price. Like, that's not what happened in the account. It was the story. So what happens in venture capital, the equivalent is, like, you know, we go into a deal, Pinterest at $200 million. What a high price. That was one. A big story. Andreessen Horowitz, they way overpaid for Pinterest at $200 million. They're crazy. You know, the Andreessen Horowitz effect, like all that, like those when all the stories come out. Well, when we bid that deal, first of all, he had like 3 other term sheets at $250 pre. But what happened is, you know, you have this VC, they go into the deal, and they're all fired up, and I've got this belief in this company, Pinterest, and they go back to their partner meeting, and they're like, oh, I really think we should invest. And they bring Pinterest in, and they meet with all the partners, and they put in their term sheet at $250 pre. And Pinterest is like, nope, not going to take it. Well, can we put in more? Nope, don't want to hear it. And so like they get their ass stomped in the deal, and then what are they going to say? What are they going to say? Oh, we like these Andreessen Horowitz guys better? No, they're going to say they bought the deal. And that's how it goes. And so, Jack, it's not because, we don't, it's not that we're the high bidder and all that thing. So it's just that like we couldn't get to the price and he still has a good company. Long story. Sorry.
All right.
See, that's the Larry Ellison in me.
So we're going to take some questions from the audience, but before we do, I need all of you to do me a favor. If you read Pando Daily regularly or watch Wise at the Snooze, you know that we have two 19-year-olds that we hired out of college that I always refer to as the 19-year-olds. Well, I will continue to do that until they're 40, but it's not actually true anymore. So one of our 19-year-olds, Nathaniel, turned 20, and I want you guys to help me sing him happy birthday. All right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nathaniel. Happy birthday to you. Come blow out your cake. Trevor and Michael have been hanging onto that glitter for hours. Come on! Come on! You're young! You're young! All right. We will have that cake for the first, 10 people who storm out of here.
Good work.
All right, let's go to questions from the audience. I don't know where the hell the mics are. We have so many people in here tonight. Ani, where are the mics? Okay, well I'm going to ask one more question then. So there's two standard questions we always ask at these, and another one got added in New York with the Matt Mullenweg PandoMonthly. Because someone asked him, what are your top 5 rappers? And I thought that was particularly a good question for you.
Rakim, of all time? Or
yeah,
currently?
of all time.
Okay, well that's hard. But for sure Rakim, Nas, Yeezy, Weezy.
It's hard.
Oh, that's a tricky one. I'll go with the personal favorite of mine and give the game some credit. So, and then that's 5.
Okay.
No game fans.
I think that's 4.
And I think I did 5. Rakim, Yeezy, Weezy.
Okay.
Nas.
I was just giving you an extra. Okay.
Oh,
There
sorry.
you go.
Check D.
What do you think
Wait,
VCs...
hang on. This
Can you
isn't
hear me?
working.
Sorry. What do you think VCs collectively have learned since the dot-com bust?
It's the
It's
the
not
mics
on.
were fucked up. Sorry.
So I think the question is, what collectively have VCs learned since the dot-com bust?
Yep.
Look, I think the big... so one big learning is capital is not free. So that was an oops. And I think that, probably the most fundamental learning is kind of the work that, Steve Blank and Eric Rice have done on lean startup methodology, which basically, kind of the essence of it from a VC perspective is get the product right to the point where you can sell it repeatably before you scale the organization, which is a big change from, in some of the literature, go big or go home was the big thing that VCs used to say in that era. And so, I would say that's probably the most fundamental change.
All right, great. All right. We have the fewest questions we've ever had. There's seriously no one. Okay. While she's getting the mic, another thing that we always ask people is, what's the one thing that you believe that almost everyone else disagrees with you on?
Well, that one's kind of obvious, that you can start a new top-tier venture capital firm and base it on a Hollywood talent agency that was started in 1975. I don't think anybody believed that but me, other than maybe Mark. But I'd say
That's a good answer.
That's probably it.
All right. No. Okay, Andy Brett. Andy
Hey.
Brett of the TechCrunch Mafia.
Exactly. So Andreessen Horowitz, known as being very friendly to technical founders. Do you still code, or do you have side projects that you work on? What excites you personally?
Yeah, so, I haven't written any code in a bit, actually, since the transition from, not being a venture capitalist to being a venture capitalist. But I do, I do spend a lot of time, for sure, on Hacker News and looking at the new developments in programming, because it does turn out to be rather fundamental to a little bit how the companies are run. And so and I'll give you an example of this. When you're hiring executives, there's always this trade between knowledge of the organization and then knowledge of the world and how things are done outside of the organization. And for a lot of positions, outside knowledge, like head of sales or head of marketing, outside knowledge is much more valuable than how the company works. But for VP of engineering, there's a giant value in understanding how the code base works. So if you do have somebody who maybe could do that job in the company, then I'd be kind of more prone for an internal promotion there than in other spots, because the architecture of the code actually ends up determining the organizational structure that's appropriate. And there's a lot of details of why that's true, but it is very true, and it's hard to get somebody from the outside to understand enough about how things work to get that right. So we have a lot of, we value kind of that part of the business very highly.
What was the last thing you coded?
Well, I actually tried to write this quilting program for my wife, because she's got this quilting program that she has that really sucks and has all kinds of bugs, but I've never had enough time to actually finish it, so shame on me. But I'm going to finish it one day, and I'm going to put it in the cloud.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so I've got two questions. I like rap music, and I'm a technical founder that's going CEO. Can we hang out sometime? My second question is, how do you deal with pretty much a scene that is very herd mentality, and you seem to have this idea of what's right despite everyone else telling you what's wrong? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, that's the big test, and actually, this is what courage is about. And I wrote a post on this called "The Fine Line Between Fear and Courage." And the difficulty is when you want to do something and everybody else thinks it's wrong, then if you don't do it, then at least nobody will think you're an idiot, even if they're right. And the hard thing about it is you think they're wrong, but you don't know they're wrong. You only think they're wrong. You think you should go right, and they all think you should go left. And if you go right and you're wrong, you're the biggest idiot of all times. And if you go left and you're wrong, it's okay. And if you go left and you're right, you're okay. So the only scenario where it's good is if you go right and you're right. And that is scary. And I had, selling LoudCloud to EDS and becoming a software company, most people thought that was wrong. And I would have been considered the biggest idiot of all time, and I tried that and it was wrong. But that's where courage comes from. And the thing to remember is the thing that Customato said, which Customato is a famous boxing trainer. He's Mike Tyson's trainer and Floyd Patterson's trainer. And what he said is, look, the difference between fear and courage, or a hero and a coward, is not what you feel. You both feel the exact same thing. You both feel very terrified. It's what you do. And that's what you have to keep. It's what do you do? What are you going to do? Are you going to be a hero, or are you going to be a coward? And just because you're feeling scared doesn't mean you're a coward. It just means that you're not a psychopath. So that's the good news.
That's awesome. Right, there's no love on the right side of the room.
Got a gentleman right here.
Go ahead.
So what kind of advice would you give to a young entrepreneurial type who has an idea but no prototype yet to get seed funding? Do you think somebody needs a prototype? Do you need to have a prototype and traction? Can it just come to an angel with an idea? What do you think in the current funding climate is appropriate?
Yeah, well, so the two things you get funded on are the kind of, right, the greatness of the idea. So and the idea being, one, like how big is the market, and two, how big a breakthrough it is. How original is it? How compelling is it? When Peter Thiel was here, he like, can you hire the 20th engineer? Is it that compelling? Like, that's the idea thing. And then the second thing is the credibility of the founder. What have they done? How smart are they? Do you believe that they can build it? And if you have those two things, you don't need a prototype. And actually, my friend Caleb, sitting here in the front row, just raised money from me. And, you know, because of his credibility, you know, he built Spy Dynamics. You know, he's a great technologist. When he had the idea, I knew he could build it. Like, and he's like, well, let me get a demo. I'm like, get a demo, don't get a demo, I don't care. Like, I believe you. Now, we don't believe everyone, so it really, I think you need a prototype if you've got not as big a track record, or kind of not as big, you know, not as kind of an easy way to reference you on your ability to build it. So that would be the thing that would tilt it one way or the other.
Okay, great. This side?
Hi. I'm a technical co-founder as well, and I find your posts on political ambition particularly interesting as well as intimidating. So what are some great resources you would recommend to someone in my position that wants to get better at that?
To get better at dealing with politics? Look, it just takes practice. This is one thing about being CEO that everybody should understand is I think there was a belief before in Silicon Valley that CEOs were born, not made, and that's just not true. Every CEO is made. I've never talked to a CEO that found it to be a natural job. It's about the most unnatural thing that you could ever imagine. And just to give you an example, like if Sarah and I are having a conversation and I'm like, Sarah, that story you just told me could have been a good story, but like the way you opened it, and then like your intonation while you were telling it, and the way you closed it, like it just really sucked. You know, you need to go back and work on that. Otherwise, don't have another conversation with me. Yeah, like you just wouldn't do that in life. But like being CEO, you do that all the time, all day long. You're constantly doing things like that, and so every bit of the job is like unnatural. And so it just takes practice and discipline. And it's kind of like, so to train. It turns out to train a boxer takes as long as it does to train a ballerina, which is amazing. Because you would think it's just fighting, like, you know, and ballet is like so complicated. But the reason that it takes so long is boxing is very unnatural in the way it works. You pick up, you know, when you go backwards, you pick up your back foot, not your front foot, and you lead with your weak hand, not your strong hand, and all these things. And to get it to feel natural takes hours and hours and hours of practice. And being a CEO, it's the same thing. It just takes hours and hours of repetition to get comfortable, like, when somebody comes up to you and is starting some political bullshit, to cut them off and just go, look, I'm not going to hear that, so go back to, you know, even though I like you a lot, even though I want you to be my friend, even though I want to be liked because I'm a human being, I'm going to tell you, like, back off. And, you know, like, you won't get it right the first time. You got to do it a few times and think it through.
I have to tell you, there's so many things that I learned in the Dick Costolo CEO class that I was like, this is so stupid. This is so Dilbert. This is so not something I should do. And I just was like, he was like, just trust me. And they've made tremendous differences in the company, like huge differences in the company.
But you got to do them a couple times.
And you feel super uncomfortable. All right, this side.
Hi. So there has been some buzz building up recently around video-based social media platforms like Run Faces, Airtime. They're claiming to, you know, revolutionize the way we meet new people online. I'm curious to hear, what are your thoughts on this new space? Because it's a really relatively new space. And do you think people will actually, you know, adopt this way of communication? And I guess, would you invest in a company from that space?
So we're invested in Airtime. So
sorry about that.
That would be. So I do believe in it.
Should have done some research.
There's a real opportunity. it seems like 10 years from now, like real-time video on the, or live video on the internet is going to be different than it is now. Like there's going to be like something that's important that happens. And what it is, we're very, very early. And so it's not clear, at all, like what will be the long-term thing. I will say that a lot of these things that become very important in general start off feeling not that important. So Twitter is a great example. Mm-hmm. The PC was a great example. Everybody, all the guys in the computer business just thought it was a toy. And the original BlackBerry two-way pager felt like a toy. And airtime to some extent feels like a toy compared to what it might be if it ends up being the way people communicate over video in real time. So we think it's a very important area, and it's a phenomenal team. They're building it, so we're excited about it.
Okay, great.
Hi. I'm curious about the decision to go into charity or philanthropy for the firm. Like, why the traditional route? You're, contradictory in most other things. Why give it away to nonprofits instead of like making capital free, doing like patronage or going that route? It's similar acqui-hires, Facebook, Google, throwing millions at people.
Yeah. So, well, one.
I don't think what you did was traditional.
Yeah.
I'll say for the record.
I don't know that it was traditional. I don't know that I completely agree with the question. So, for those of you who don't know what happened, all of the general partners in the firm basically agreed that we would give half of our money away to charity that we earned at the firm. Basically, half of everything we get, we're going to give away. And here's why. Let me just say why we did it. The world is complex, and it's not, and it can't be entirely fair from what you contribute to what you get is very, very uneven. And even if you just look at Silicon Valley, if you look at the kind of brilliant people at Stanford Hospital, or some of the people who build the buildings that we live in, or the guys who teach the kids at the teachers at the schools are incredibly smart and dedicated. But there really is no way that they're going to ever make anything like what I make at Andreessen Horowitz. It's just impossible the way society is structured. There's no way it can happen. But their contribution to what I do is significant. Without them, I've got kids that are in those schools. I get sick, I go to those doctors. I live in that environment. And I appreciate it. I really appreciate the effort and the work and what they do. And so for me to be in a position where I can put money into the resources that I share with them and make their life a little easier, I just feel like it's the right thing to do. So it's nothing more than that. And I don't think there's any kind of way I can give money to other people. If you're a technology entrepreneur, you've got every opportunity to make a gazillion dollars. That opportunity is there, whether I invest and get a percentage of your company or not. But if you're a teacher, you don't have that opportunity. But man, if I can get you the resources to do your job better so that you've got a little more space in your classroom, that could make the difference for a kid who could do something that's really important. And so that's what I'm about, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm very proud that our whole firm is doing that with me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What are your thoughts on crowdfunding, and how will that change what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I think it's I think it's super interesting, and my friend Naval Ravikant is the leader of it. He got the law changed, go Naval. That was awesome. He went to Washington. He's just a guy one of us. He's I got to get this done. And went to Washington with Steve Case, and they changed the law. And I was that blew my mind. I was wow. So I think it's very interesting. It's a little bit unknown, coming from being a public company to CEO, where the rules around protecting investors from scamsters, regular people from investing in scams, are so stringent and so like intense, to go to like crowdfunding of like startups is a little bit like, I feel like an old person, I guess. Like, wow, this newfangled stuff, when I was a boy, they would never have allowed it. So I'm still like getting settled on it, but I think it potentially could be like very interesting. Like Kickstarter is like a really fascinating example of it on a small scale. And so, something we're following very closely, and I'm all over AngelList and understanding what's going on there, and I think it's a super interesting innovation which could be awesome, but it's really, really, really early.
Okay, great. Do you mind keeping going with questions?
Let's go. Bring it.
Okay.
Awesome. So, excuse me, I run a startup incubator, and so we talk with a lot of entrepreneurs, and for the early stage people, they kind of feel that, at least ones I've talked to, that the relationships with VCs is kind of like a barrier to entry into getting funding, much larger than getting traction. And so I just want to see like what you think of in terms of the future of using personal relationships in the deal sourcing method, and is that good, and is that something that's going to be changing? Is it going to be more meritocracy, or going to continue with using your personal networks as a way of sourcing deals and filtering them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, once again, Naval's on the forefront of that, and he's kind of democratizing it, and we'll see how that goes. So I will say this. The personal network method has a value to it, and let me explain. So to be an entrepreneur successfully, you have to have great courage and great determination. And to get to a connection in Silicon Valley to somebody who knows me, for example, isn't actually that high a bar. It's like a pretty medium kind of bar, like find Caleb, he's right here.
Right here, for anyone who wants to mob him.
And so historically, it's actually been like a reasonable test of seriousness for an entrepreneur. Like I was talking when we got into the business to one of my friends at another firm, and who is a 30-year-old firm, and I said, of all the deals that you got over the transom in that 30 years, like just mailed into the alias versus guys who came in through a connection, how many got funded over the transom? He said in 30 years, one deal. So like that, that's a real thing. And there are other examples in other fields. So there was a company founded by some great entrepreneurs. I think it was called GarageBand. Was that Ali and Hadi's company?
Yeah.
To sign the unsigned bands. They signed a lot of unsigned bands, and like none of them were successful. And then there was Project Greenlight, which is sign the unsigned screenwriters, and all the movies sucked. So not to say that the current kind of infrastructure is perfect, but it's not completely idiotic either, and that there is a real kind of filter and test on, like, do you have what it takes to at least get to a top tier VC? Because it's pretty unlikely that if you don't have that you're going to go out there and, whoop a guy like Mark Zuckerberg and take his market, because like that guy's pretty tough.
It also goes back to can you hire the 20th, engineer thing that Peter was talking about. I mean, if you're not inspiring enough about your company that you can get someone who knows something, and to introduce you to Ben Horowitz.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys who come in, like Jim Gilliam, who's the CEO of NationBuild, is great. Like he's like a very shy, introverted guy, but like so compelling. Like several people call me and say, "You got to meet this guy." Like he's like, wow, he's amazing. Like he's just an amazing human being. And so like I'll meet anybody like that, and so I do think there's something to it. Not to say that, like, I think what Naval's doing is going to really test that, and we'll see what happens there. But it'll be interesting.
Go ahead.
Hi. I'm surprised we didn't talk, or there wasn't any conversation yet about the scouting program, if you can call it a program. And this is not a question about that, but I'm curious, it may relate. What are your thoughts about the levels of seed funding and where an A round might come in, A round versus convertible note, and levels of early stage funding?
Yeah, so look, the seed market has, so we actually, Mark and I started with a kind of a seed fund, like was just our money before we started the firm. And in that period when we were doing it, seed deals were about a third the price they are now for basically the same deal. So the pricing has gone way up and is very attractive for entrepreneurs. And that just kind of is a matter of fact. And there's a lot of, and it doesn't take a lot of money to change pricing in seed market because the deals are small. So, you know, like $100 million in new money into that market means, you know, could mean like 200 deals get funded, which is a lot of deals. And so like that, I would just say it's a very good thing for entrepreneurs. It allows for a lot of experimentation. It's good for the ecosystem. And like, you know, we're for it in general. We're like, good, go for it. Like what that means for guys who are purely seed investors, we'll see how well that works. I don't know yet. But it's certainly kind of relative. If you go relative to 2007 and 2008, seed prices has kind of tripled and venture prices are probably around the same. So that's like an interesting difference. But I don't know what it means in the grand scheme of things.
Can you put numbers on that when you say it's tripled from where to where?
You know, well, well, it depends on the deal. So there's a lot of variation in seed deals anyway. But you know, well, Instagram was $2.25 million, two and a quarter seed deal, $250 pre-money on the seed round, and now I think it would easily be, you know, 7 or higher. You know, and maybe it was video or social cam, it would be 400. But, you know, so things have changed.
All right, let's get through the rest of the questions that are standing. Otherwise, Ben will be here all night. But we're going to get through all you guys. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. As an MBA, particularly East Coast MBA, working at an early stage company this summer, doing BD, I really appreciated the post from a month ago. But what do you think it's going to take for Silicon Valley to tip, not for MBA founders, but for MBA hires?
Well, you know.
And your post was maybe now it's time to hire MBAs.
Yeah, so, and it kind of went through the history of it. So, you know, and look, a lot of the MBAs of the previous generation were super destructive in startups. And like, you know, there's real memory there. And a lot of the, you know, like capital was super destructive in startups. And there's a lot of memory there. So like fat startups and MBAs got like real out of vogue all of a sudden. And, you know, I think it just takes some people like getting in there and doing good work. I mean, so my friend Tristan from Foursquare, who's now an EIR at the firm, like, you know, Stanford MBA, although he keeps it a secret. But, you know, he did a great job there. And that kind of, at least that opens one company's eyes to, look, we can hire these guys out of school and like some of them are really good and have the right kind of ambition and will make good contributions to the company. But it's one MBA at a time, and you know, and that's the way it'll start to move.
So don't be a shitty MBA, I think is the message of that.
You know, and the key thing that people look for is what kind of ambition do you have? Are you ambitious for yourself, or are you ambitious for the company? And if you're ambitious for yourself and you're an MBA, you know, that's a bad combination right now.
All right, so being a little new to the scene out here, I have a question. When an entrepreneur comes to your boardroom to pitch you, what are the personality traits that you're looking for? Either 2 or 3, something that really jumps out at you.
Yeah, so look, you know, I really look for kind of leadership and determination and courage. And so if you kind of break that down, you know, I usually break leadership into 3 things, and it's ultimately it's what Colin Powell says, which is leadership is the ability to get somebody to follow you, if only out of curiosity. And there's kind of 3 things, like, you know, are you compelling? Is your vision compelling, and can you articulate it to the point where people get excited and want to work for that? And then it's kind of the second thing, which I always call the Bill Campbell trait, which is, do people want to work for you? Do they believe, are you the kind of person that they believe will put their interest ahead of your own? And then do they really believe that? Do you really care about the people who work for you, and is it important to you that they succeed? And then thirdly, do people believe that you're competent enough to go execute that vision, even if you do care about them and so forth. So those are the kind of, and we really want the technical founder to be a leader, because we don't want to hire a professional CEO, because we think it's better to have the technical founder run the company. And so that's a combination that we're looking for. And then courage, and a lot on courage is, I got Mark Andreessen with me, so I'm going to have him ask you some really hard questions and try and get you to change your mind and back off and kiss his butt. And if you do that, then I know you're probably a punk. So, the little tests like that. So we try to figure that out. But it takes a lot to run a company. It's hard. It's hard. I have incredible respect for for Sarah and what she's doing. To Pando Daily is it's a hard thing to build. It's tough. You have competitors coming at you. You've got cash issues. You've got employees who go south on you from time to time. And you're trying to hold it all together, and you're learning how to do the job all at the same time. That's not for somebody who's not determined and who's not courageous and not a great leader. And I'm doing you a favor if I don't give you money and you're like that. Trust me.
That's awesome. By the way, thank you for coming, because I totally designed this series for people like you who are new to the Valley and don't know how to get plugged in, so you'd have a place to come every month. So I'm really, really glad you're here. All right.
When you're competing for deals, what's the brand that you want your firm to have, and how much of that has been informed by the firms that were investing in, LoudCloud and Opsware?
Yeah, and I've written a lot about this. So look, what we try to be is the very best firm for the technical founder who wants to run the company. And we're very oriented around that, and we do a lot of things around that. And the basic position consists of two things that we do that we believe are unique. And people argue that we're just good at PR, but 3 years later, I think it's probably more than PR, but we'll see. But the two things are one network. So if you're a technical founder, one of the hardest things to do is you generally walk in without a network. Who do you call on? What executives do you know? Who do you know in the press? What customers can you go sell to? All these things. And by centralizing the network, by it not being my network or Mark's network or Jeff Jordan's network or Scott Weiss's network, but the firm's network, totally professionalized and made easily accessible to you, it just helps you ride like a pro from day one. And then the second thing that we do is, when we put somebody on your board, there's somebody who have kind of had your job, who's been a founder or a CEO, who's kind of felt the pain, spit the blood, had the cold sweat. And so when things go wrong, you can say, hey, this is screwed up, and they won't freak out. We know it's a sausage factory. We know that there's stuff wrong all the time. And we'll go, oh, when I screwed that up, this is what I did, not, oh, what else is wrong? Let me call my other friends and see what's wrong. So that's the thing that we really try to avoid. And I think, and then, we like to think that the partners we have can help you develop that skill set to be CEO, all those weird kind of nuanced, difficult things to develop. And so I think at that we're very good and very competitive. And the other firms are very, there's guys who are better at a lot of things than us, but that's kind of our strength.
I mean, I'll say I'm not an Andreessen Horowitz company, but because we have mostly individual investors, but we have about a dozen investors, and there's exactly one who's actually done recruiting calls for me to convince people to join before we launched, and it's one of your partners.
There you go.
Go ahead.
All right. First of all, I want to thank both of you for a great chat. And I want to use the last question to selfishly pick your brain on the space that my company's in, namely e-commerce. And I know your firm is involved with both Fab and ShoeDazzle. I want to know what caught your eye about them. And secondly, where you think e-commerce and technology is going, namely in terms of personalization and subscription-based.
Yeah. So that's a pretty complicated question. So let me try and. So there's a bunch of things going on in e-commerce that are all interesting. One is this kind of verticalization thing, and that's Shoe Dazzle is a good example of that. So it turns out that regular retail is a pretty long supply chain, and most of you, because like the real estate business of the retail thing and the marketing and the merchandising are very different than design and manufacturing. And so they got very decoupled, and they're kind of like, from an economic standpoint, there's a lot of kind of middlemen, like profits getting taken all along the way. So one of the things that Shoe Dazzle does is like they manufacture the shoes and then go all the way through to merchandising them, which you can do in e-commerce. And there's a bunch, Bonobos does this, Warby Parker does this. And that's proven to be like a pretty interesting model for a lot of those companies. Then on the other hand, what Fab does is also, pretty unique, is they kind of have this combination of really great design taste and curation, and then, using social distribution in like very advanced ways to grow the business in a different way. And it's kind of the browse shopping experience as opposed to the search shopping experience. So both of those are very interesting trends and things that are happening and that have been compelling so far. And e-commerce is really, we've been waiting years and years for there to be something other than Amazon and eBay in e-commerce, and it seems to be happening now, and it's definitely an exciting time.
Okay, great. So just two housekeeping things, and then your last question. So one is we actually are a business, and we're getting more serious about actually bringing in revenue. So if you're interested in sponsoring this event, we're starting to line up a bunch of sponsors for the next couple ones. I think it's great exposure. You have a lot of obviously smart people here, as you can always tell by the questions. You have great guests here. If you're interested in ever sponsoring these events, we'd love to have you help support us. We use this as a way that we can bring you really high quality journalism about the space, and I pay our reporters really well. I give them benefits, and we believe it's a hard job and people need to be paid well for it. So if it's something you want to help support, Jeannie sells sponsorships for us. Her email address is jeanne@pandodaily.com, and you'll help ensure this continues. As you know, we only charge $20 a ticket. We lose money on that, but we want this to be something that poor entrepreneurs can come to every single month to hear from people like Ben and get tapped into the ecosystem. So that's one thing. The next is in July, we have quite a bevy of PandoMonthlies, and I'll go in reverse order. So none of these have been announced yet. So in New York on the 24th of July, our guest is going to be Rob Burnett, who's the CEO of Worldwide Pants. Not a tech guy, but has used the internet in order to crowdsource all of the elements of his movie he has coming out. And is someone from old media who's, produced Ed, Everybody Loves Raymond, Tonight Show, Late Night with David Letterman, I always get the name of that thing wrong. All of these old media things that's recently really embraced the web and crowdsourcing and everything else to do his job. So we're going to talk a lot about the intersection of Hollywood and the internet. That's going to be an amazing, amazing event. If you're in New York, definitely check that one out. In San Francisco on July 19th, we're going to have Mark Pincus here, guy who's been much in the news lately. We're super pumped about that. And the curveball on July 12th, we're going to do our first ever PandoMonthly in LA. And when you go to LA, there's only one person that you want to do your first event. Can you guess who?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're
the
in
basis
LA,
of Iron Man.
The basis of Iron Man. And
that is going to be awesome.
It is going to be awesome. And when SpaceX goes public, we'll be the second guy after Jim Clark who has had $3 billion plus exits.
That and with much more diverse set of companies, I might add.
Yes, and didn't need a bubble to do it.
Yeah, a car company, a rocket ship company, and a payments company. That's
right.
That's quite the spread.
So we have quite a diversity of amazing, amazing entrepreneurs in July. I hope to see you guys at one or all of those events. $20 in each city. Hope to see you guys there. Okay, so last thing. is, and you know I'm asking this if you've ever looked at the site, your mediocre superpower.
My mediocre superpower.
Do you know this concept? So we always ask people,
Yes.
if you had a mediocre superpower, what would it be? Would you like me to give you some examples of a mediocre superpower?
Yeah, give me some examples of mediocre.
So Amanda, who came up with this question, hers was to never be cold getting out of the shower. I had just gotten over having a baby when she brought this up, and so I said to never have to pee. You could just sort of blink and you wouldn't have to get up to go to the bathroom. The best answer we've ever gotten was to temporarily detach your arm while spooning with a girl. Which is so good, it gets a laugh every time.
That is quite the superpower.
I mean, it's mediocre. You're not, flying.
Yeah.
Now, some people try to cheat. Dustin Moskovitz was like, I want to make sure the wind doesn't blow around me as I'm riding my bike to work. And I was like, so you want to be God controlling the weather, not mediocre.
Well,
so.
that's for Dustin, that is mediocre. Given he co-founded Facebook. I would just like to be able to rhyme on time.
You were so prepared for that. All right, well, I say this every month, and at some point these discussions will disappoint, but this is the fastest we have ever sold out 500 tickets for PandoMonthly.
Thank you
and
so much.
You were amazing. Huge round of applause for Ben Horowitz. Thank you.